Welcome to Dead Souls Social Club.
This audio presentation contains graphic details of death, violence, and controversial subject matter. Listener discretion is strongly advised. From Dead Souls Media, this is The Sky Lobby. I'm Jamie Black, a researcher and psychologist, and I'll be your host for tonight. Good evening, everyone. I'm standing at the 9/11 Memorial in New York City. It's really windy and freezing cold, but the mood here is somber and respectful. I'm recording this for a future episode, and I wanted to be here when I began this one. 9/11, for those who can recall it, had a unique impact to almost everyone who experienced it, whether that be on live television or in person at what we now call Ground Zero. Everyone remembers where they were that day, and everyone feels the need to share it. It's a kind of catharsis from the impact that day caused. Like millions of others around the world, I was glued to a television screen watching the horrific scenes happening as they occurred. Heartbroken, terrified, and being British, concerned that my country was about to go to war in support of our biggest ally, the United States. I've spoken about 9/11 on the podcast before. Hell, many people have spoken about it before. It was a morning that changed a culture, changed a society. It changed the whole world in a matter of minutes, and in many ways, that one event has affected a wealth of things in the 2.5 decades since it occurred. Following the attack, the Daily Mirror proclaimed the world will never be the same again. It was right, but in more ways than we could have possibly foreseen. I'm going to discuss a specific element of the events that day on tonight's episode, and narrow in on a niche and rarely talked about incident within the incident. It happened at 9:03 a.m. A second plane struck the South World Trade Center tower, ramming into the building between the 77th and 85th floors. Tonight our focus narrows to that one structure, that one tragic timeline in the South Tower. It's often overshadowed in the immediate chaotic memory by the North Tower, which was struck first. But the story of the South Tower is unique, harrowing, and critical to painting a complete picture of that morning's tragedy. At the epicenter of the impact zone was the 78th floor, known as the Sky Lobby. What happened at that part of the building instantaneously became a horrific scene of carnage. So much so that it would be referred to as the floor of gore. You see, when Flight 11 hit the North Tower at 8:46 a.m, the innocent people inside the South Tower had a crucial 17-minute window. They had warnings. There was chaos, but they had a choice. Do they stay put and wait for further instruction, or do they try to evacuate? This brief period is a testament to human instinct, confusion, and bureaucratic failure under unimaginable pressure. But at 9:03 a.m, that crucial window slammed abruptly shut as United Airlines Flight 175, piloted by the hijacker Marwan al-Shahi, struck the South Tower at more than 590 miles per hour, or 950 kilometers per hour. That Tuesday morning in September quickly became the intersection of life and death.
Between the people and the tower in front of me.
Not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God. That looks like a second plane.
Dear
Has
Lord.
I
just
did not
hit.
see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of absolutely
Yes, and
my
that's
view.
the second explosion. You could see the plane come in just from the right-hand side of the screen.
The 78th floor of the World Trade Center's South Tower wasn't an office floor like the others. It is what they called the Sky Lobby, a massive marble-lined open space. It was larger than half a city street in length, with room-sized express elevators that could carry around 55 adults, whisking them to and from the ground floor in just 60 seconds. I'll post some photographs of the South Tower's Sky Lobby in the description below this episode. For thousands of employees on the upper floors of the building, this was the main daily commute pathway 1,300 feet into the sky. You see, when the first plane hit the North Tower at 8:46 a.m, the people throughout the South Tower felt the building shake and saw the smoke and flames in the building opposite. Very few people were actually aware that a plane had struck the tower, though. It had all happened so fast and had struck the opposite side of the North Tower that the people in the South could easily see. Many thought that either a bomb, large fire, or earthquake had suddenly erupted in the tower opposite, so fear was minimal. The towers were some of the tallest in the world, yes, but they were nowhere near tall enough to be in the paths of flying aircraft, so it never entered anyone's minds that an airplane could have caused the explosion next door. But regardless, it was a huge fire, and a large hole was blown out of the building, so many people began evacuating the South Tower as a precaution. The confusion, however, was immense. Some kept working. Others started down the stairs, but many gathered at the Sky Lobby on the 78th floor, waiting for the express elevators and trying to figure out what was happening. No one had answers. There was no announcements, and no one took any sort of control. There simply was no protocol or plan for a situation like this. Office workers Judy Wine and Gigi Singer had just witnessed the explosion from the North Tower as they were working on the 103rd floor. They were terrified, so they raced down the stairs, where they eventually made it to the 78th floor Sky Lobby. They hoped to find answers and guidance there. When they opened the door from the stairwell into the lobby, they were faced with chaos. There were more than 200 other people crowded near the elevators, hoping to get out, stricken with fear. This is South Tower survivor Joe Dittmar.
78th floor. 78th floor in that building, as well as the 44th floor in that building, were known as sky lobbies. Second and third lobbies in the buildings because they couldn't let the elevators go all the way up straight, 110. Okay. So the 78th floor sky lobby was just that, another lobby. And when we got to that 78th floor, the woman that was running our meeting is screaming back at me. She wants me to go to the elevator with her. And finally, some of my good common sense took over, and I thought, no, building, state of duress, fire. It wasn't our building at that point, but stay in the stairwell, Joe. And I looked at Mary, and I kind of politely waved at her and continued my way down the stairwell rather than getting off onto that 78th floor. Arguably, the best decision I've made in what is still my life. We were between floors 74 and 72 when the second plane plowed through our building. And the plane went through our building between floors 77 and 82. We were just a few stories below. This fire stairwell, this concrete bunker that we're inside starts to shake so violently back and forth at angles it shouldn't be shaking. The concrete spidering out, the handrails breaking away from the walls, the steps undulating underneath our feet like waves in the ocean. We feel this heat ball blowing by us. We smell this jet fuel, and this thing's just rocking back and forth and back and forth and back. It felt like forever. And you would think there would be this massive pandemonium. There was nothing in that stairwell at that point but just this stunned Silence, stunned silence. Everybody was going in the same direction. We were all heading down.
Ed Nichols was hurriedly making his way down the stairwell when he heard a building-wide announcement over the loudspeakers. It claimed that the South Tower was safe and secure, and encouraged all staff members to return to their desks and continue with their day and work as normal. Whilst this may sound illogical and somewhat nonsensical, the logic behind this instruction was actually quite sound. Because on the ground floor, where nothing of the North Tower's zone of destruction could be seen, the security desk will receive an instruction from police and fire authorities not to let people out of the building due to falling glass, steel and bodies from the North Tower. So, with this, Nichols and a few others that he was with began heading back upstairs. Christine Sasser and Sylvian Ramsandar had already made it down to the ground level, but they began their way back to the 81st floor to retrieve a forgotten wallet. Kelly Ryhair, well, he was realising that he couldn't work without his Palm Pilot, and unfortunately he had left it on the 100th floor, so he decided to go back up and retrieve it too. Meanwhile, Eric Thompson opted to sit and wait in one of the alcoves of the Sky lobby, hoping that the lobby crowd would eventually thin out. Each of these small decisions and moments of hesitation would soon make the ultimate difference between whether they were about to live or die. None of these people knew that at that very moment United Flight 175 was screaming towards them at almost full speed. Brian Sweeney, a former Navy pilot and a passenger on that flight, was able to make one last telephone call to his wife.
Jules, this is Ryan. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well and it's not looking good, I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy to time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you. And I'll see you later. Hi, babe. Hope I call you.
Another passenger aboard that very same flight was Peter Hansen. He was on the phone to his father. His father was watching the North Tower burning on live television. As Peter talked to his father, screaming was heard erupting in the background as the passengers could see out of the window what was about to happen. Peter screamed, "Oh my God, oh my God," before the line went dead.
Glass flew everywhere.
At roughly 9:03 a.m, United Flight 175 hit the South Tower with an almighty explosion, tearing through everything between the 77th and 85th floors. There were two explosions in quick succession. The first was the collision of the plane. The second was the jet fuel that had sprayed across the impact zone, igniting into a giant fireball. With the second jolt, ceiling tiles and air conditioning ducts fell from the ceiling and door frames blew out of the wall. The explosion and searing heat blast ripped directly through the Sky lobby. The Sky lobby, where more than 200 people were gathered. The plane's left wing cut through the packed elevator lobby like a giant scythe, slicing across people standing just inches apart, killing most, although sparing others, albeit with horrific injuries. These were the ones who weren't closest to the impact wall. Those would have been incinerated alive within seconds. The blast threw people like dolls, tearing their bodies apart effortlessly. Judy Wayne was thrown through the air, shattering every bone in her arm, breaking 3 ribs and puncturing a lung. The blast fired Kelly Ryhair into the back wall of the elevator that he had just stepped into. Almost instantly, the floor buckled and the elevator dropped nearly 2 feet as flames funneled up the shaft. thick, black, acrid smoke filled the entire space. Anyone who was in the nearby elevators faced some of the most horrific fates imaginable that day. The luckier ones may have perished instantly in the blast, whilst everyone else in the elevators fell to their deaths as their elevator cars plummeted after the plane severed their cables. Joe Dittmar, once again.
Sky lobby level. Nobody that went to the sky lobby made it out. When the plane went through the building, the elevator cables were just cut. Those elevators went straight to the ground. Nobody survived.
There were others who weren't as fortunate. They were trapped between floors with nowhere to run, enduring rising heat, thick smoke, and the slow seep of jet fuel from the crash, ultimately facing an unthinkably slow and agonizing end of slowly being burned alive. Kelly Reicher's first thought as he was trapped in the wrecked elevator was that he would die in the flames painfully and slowly. In a desperate bid to avoid that fate, he climbed towards the ceiling, intending to inhale the smoke quickly and lose consciousness. But then he noticed that the elevator doors were cracked open just an inch. So seizing the chance, Reicher pried them apart, jammed his briefcase between them, and crawled out into the devastated 78th floor sky lobby. What he saw, as he entered the lobby, was unspeakable carnage and horror. The entire floor was ablaze. There were 2 massive holes at either side of the building, and a mangled mess of metal where the elevators once stood. One of the survivors recalled the horrifying sight. Here is a brief and candid clip of him in conversation with emergency workers just after his escape from the building. I apologize for the poor quality of the sound on this one. All around the floor was strewn with torn limbs, scattered remains, pools of blood, and body parts. Devastation left victims dismembered in ways too graphic to fully comprehend. Witnesses stated that a lot of body parts were unrecognizable, hunks of meat and flesh. Based on those same survivor accounts, an estimated 200 people were inside the 2,600 square foot sky lobby when United Flight 175 hit. It became the deadliest single location in the South Tower that day. Only 12 people on that floor survived after the fatal crash. Donna Spira, who had been standing toward the back of the lobby with a few others, was lucky to have survived the blast. Initially thrown more than 30 feet, she was knocked unconscious in the impact blast. When she regained consciousness, her arms were on fire. Her watch had melted against her skin. She dropped her cell phone only to look down and see Casey Parbu at her feet, the friend who she had stayed with through all 22 flights down to the lobby from their office at the AON Corporation on floor 100. Parbu was deceased. She lay severely mangled and contorted. In all of that chaos and darkness, heroes would emerge. The first was a young man named Wells Crowther, often referred to as the man in the red bandana. He was a 24-year-old equities trader for Sandler, O'Neill & Partners and worked on the 104th floor. Crowther was also a volunteer firefighter. He had made it down to the 78th floor and immediately began organizing rescue efforts. Crowther saved 18 lives that day. Ling Young, who was a tax auditor for the New York State Tax Department, had been knocked unconscious by the initial blast. She regained consciousness with blood covering her glasses and third-degree burns on her face, back, and arms. Through the smoke, Young could barely see. She could feel the skin slipping from her charred arm. She was also afraid that moving might send her plunging through the damaged and now extremely fragile floor. That's when Wells Crowther appeared. He came over screaming above the roaring blaze and said that he had found an intact stairwell and to follow him. Crowther had a red bandana tied around his face, one that he always kept in his pocket. Crowther led Young into stairway A. It turned out to be the only intact stairwell remaining. All others had been severed at the 78th floor. This meant that no one on floors above 78 would be able to get out and were now trapped. After descending about a dozen flights with Young, Crowther told her and a few others who had joined them along the way that they were now safe. He said he was going to go back upstairs to help further. Mary Joss, a 54-year-old section head, had been knocked unconscious in the blast too, and awoke surrounded by bodies, flesh and blood. Her face was burned, flesh ripped from her arm, and her shoes blown off. She had sustained third-degree burns to 20% of her body, as well as 3 deep shrapnel wounds to her left arm, leg and scalp from flying debris. Crawling on her hands and knees through the debris and body parts, she found the door to the fire stairs. As she pushed it open, she called back into the darkness, quote, "If anyone can hear me, this is where the stairs are." Only 12 people who were in that 78th floor lobby when Flight 175 hit would make it out alive. 9 were at the north end of the lobby, farthest away from the impact. 3 were in alcoves off the main lobby. They all escaped through stairway A, the only intact stairwell remaining. Judy Wine and Gigi Singer both recovered and met up with Wells Crowther, who led them down the stairwell. He stayed with them for more than 15 floors, then turned back up the stairs once again for a third rescue trip. Donna Spira, crawling through the smoky darkness, saw a silhouette in the light of the stairwell entrance. She walked towards that shadow, leaving behind the remains of her friends, all of whom had died. Eric Thompson, the analyst, who had retreated to the 77th floor just before the impact, found Mary Joss on the stairs and helped her all 78 floors down to safety on the ground. As they were making their way down, firefighters were climbing up into the very heart of the fire, none of whom would survive that day. When firefighters reached the 78th floor, even they were stunned. The devastation was unlike anything they had ever seen. 45-year-old Fire Battalion Chief Oreo Palmer radioed his horror to his colleagues on the ground. He reported that there were multiple civilian casualties, with a scene more horrific than he had ever seen in his life. He requested support from at least 2 fire teams up on 78. Wells Crowther made at least 3 trips back into that devastated lobby to save people, showing them the way to safety. He then disappeared back into the smoke and flames to help others. The survival of all 12 was a miracle within itself. Every little move they made that day was the difference between making it out and never being seen again. Roughly 1/3 of the South Tower's 611 victims died on that single floor. When they finally made it to the lobby, rescuers guided them towards safety. Joe Dittmar again.
When we got down to the lobby level and out of the fire stairwell, you're looking through these arching glass windows, you're looking to your left, to your right, you're seeing crumbled concrete, twisted steel, red blotches on the ground, and you knew what these red markings were on the ground. They couldn't let us out at the ground level because it was raining concrete, steel, and bodies. They escorted us down into the concourse level of the Trade Center complex. And that's the first time we had the chance to encounter people who were in real need, gaping wounds, missing limbs, real blood and gut stuff.
But just as they were making it out of the exit and onto the streets, the unthinkable happened. A deep rumble echoed above them. The ground shook fiercely, akin to a huge earthquake. They turned back and the South Tower was collapsing behind them. Anyone left in the sky lobby, the wounded who couldn't move, the rescuers and firefighters who were trying to provide help, were gone in an instant. As the building collapsed, the people inside would have been vaporized by the fast-moving concrete, steel and glass plummeting around them. Floor 78 had been described by those who witnessed it as a portal to hell. It now became a tomb. The fire, the heat, the destruction. It already felt like the worst imaginable scene, and then somehow it got even worse. What's most disturbing to think about is how narrowly this could have played out differently. As United Flight 175 approached, the hijacker adjusted the aircraft's speed and tilt in the final seconds, turning and angling it more precisely with the tower. That seemingly minor correction changed everything. Because had the wings struck just a few floors higher, then many on the 78th floor may have survived. But there was no undoing what had actually happened. In those terrifying minutes after the impact, with fire consuming the sky lobby and the screams of the injured and dying echoing through the smoke, survival came down to just a few seconds, and to people who were willing or able to act. Fight or flight. One of them was Wells Crowther, later known, as I said earlier in this episode, as the man in the red bandana. He guided multiple people to safety, making at least 3 trips into the smoke-filled lobby. He put aside his fears, concerns and thoughts for his own safety to ensure that others escaped. He didn't have to, but he did again and again. His body was recovered months later in the rubble of the Twin Towers. He was found alongside firefighters within the ground-level remains of the South Tower. 2 of the women he helped, Judy Wayne and Ling Young, would later recognize him from a photograph that his mother had shared. The story of the 78th floor isn't just about tragedy. It's about courage in the face of absolute chaos. It's about ordinary people making split-second decisions that change lives, and it's about those who ran toward danger instead of away from it. It was one of the most intense, horrific and terrifying locations to have been within the World Trade Center that morning, and there are no words that can truly describe the sheer dread that all those present must have been overwhelmed with. Wells Crowther could have saved himself, but he chose to save others. And the same should be said for all of the police, firemen and ambulance crew who went into the buildings knowing they weren't coming back alive. Firefighter from Engine 54, Carl F. Asaro, said to a friend just before he entered the building on the morning of 9/11, quote, "Tell my wife and children that I love them all more than anything, and I'll be waiting for them." The first responders saving lives that morning knew they wouldn't survive. They knew they wouldn't be going home to their loved ones that day, but they ran into harm's way anyway. Do you think you could do that? Imagine that feeling, if you can. You see, that's the legacy of the 78th floor. Not just in the lives lost or the petrifying scenes of sheer hell that played out there, but in the heroism that shined through one of the darkest and most horrific events of that day. It was a reminder that even in tragedy, there's always a glimmer of humanity to hold on to. So I guess, as a slow piano piece increases in pace and power, over a fade-in shot of an American flag blowing in the wind above the skies of New York City or above the Rocky Mountains, many will put their hand on their heart and be proud to be an American when they hear stories of heroism and bravery, the likes of which were displayed that day. But these uniquely human traits are just that, human. They aren't confined to culture, imaginary borders, or allegiances to political ideology. They are simply human. A reminder that in the face of the strongest adversity, no matter who you are or where you are from, there are still some amongst us who have a glimmer of that noble soul within them. Good night, everyone.